I'll be signing a bill, the first in the nation, saying enough. ICE, unmask. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of?
12 seconds later.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Joe Rothrock. I'm the special agent in charge of the Dallas FBI field office. I can confirm at this time that the FBI is investigating this incident as an act of targeted violence. It is unfortunately just the most recent example we've seen of targeted violence, to include here in North Texas, where back on July 4th, we saw a coordinated attack carried out against an immigration detention center in Alvarado, Texas. What I can also share with you is that early evidence that we've seen from rounds that were found near the suspected shooter contain messages that are anti-ICE in nature.
You know, I hate to be right under circumstances like this, but quite literally the last video we did on this channel, go look, was responding to Gavin Newsom and that idiotic question of, what could ICE agents possibly have to be afraid of? Why do they see a necessity to cover their faces and hide their identities? Well, the answer was always very obvious, but do you see it now, Gavin? The answer here is your own voters. That's who they have to be afraid of. The violent and radical left-wing activist base in this country, which is not exactly a small handful of people, that the Democrat Party, far from condemning, actively supports, funds, cheers on, and even makes excuses for them when they screw up like the loving parents that they are. And it appears that we just saw yet another potentially deadly consequence of that relationship between the Democrat establishment and the violent radical left. After today, ICE agents were shot at in Dallas, Texas by an alleged sniper. By all current evidence we have, this guy does appear to be a left-wing terrorist. After all, he wrote anti-ICE engravings on the bullets, much like Tyler Robinson did just a few weeks ago. And it's worth noting that obviously not only does this appear to be not the first case of left-wing terrorism, this is not even the first case of ICE agents getting shot at in the state of Texas. And I fear, unfortunately, it may not be the last. When you consider how many leftists in this country are actually just deranged and violent. You know, you're going to hear a lot of excuses about this in terms of, whoa, it's just one radical crazy. Obviously, we condemn it. But as we've pointed out for you time and time again, ever since Charlie Kirk's assassination, no, it's not a small group of people. About 50%, according to polls, of leftists in this country support assassinations or other forms of political violence. There is a reason, by the way. Every single time, for instance, a conservative activist goes to table at a university, they will run into at least one of these crazy people who is obviously like mentally ill and deranged up there, and they get either violent or super duper aggressive. And it's like not a uncommon thing. It's just like almost a given that that's going to happen. Why? Because there's a lot of this in the country. Okay. Now, who knows whether the chicken or the egg came first, right? What came first, the mental illness and then the leftism, or the leftism and then the mental illness? But this is all to say, guys, it's unfortunately not surprising. It's like, what, the fifth example, perhaps? I'm not even keeping count there, though, of apparent left-wing violence within the last 2 weeks. And almost ironically, what do we still keep on hearing? Trump needs to tone down the temperature. Oh, really? Really? Trump needs to tone down the temperature, right? I think genuinely there was a lot of fear, and I had this fear as well, that in the outrage and the anger against Charlie Kirk's assassination, some right-winger was going to try to take up arms or retaliate. But it turns out, no. It's just simply more radical, violent leftists across the country, who there are a lot of, just got activated and said, oh, let's all go do the same thing. And let's all cheer that, because apparently, right, this is what they support, this is what they like, and this is what they are all about. So let's stop making excuses. Let's stop saying, as you'll see the media is about to say now, oh, we can't yet figure out a motive, and, you know, it's not really actually representative of how people feel in this country. Yes, it is. And again, going back to the central question of what Gavin Newsom was trying to ask us, that is why, Gavin, And you're about to hear, by the way, the Democrat Party is not going to change its rhetoric on ICE one bit. You want to tone down the temperature in this country? How about stop comparing them to stormtroopers or the Gestapo? Stop describing them as these masked men who are just kidnapping people when that is not what is happening. But of course, why are the Democrats doing this? Because they're perfectly okay with the stochastic terrorism they're inciting. They understand, by the way, let's make no mistake, they understand, because they see these people at their events, how like screwed up upstairs most of their voters are. They egg it on anyway. These people are scum. And I'm so tired of it, frankly. But anyways, that said, we will get into the actual story here, okay? Just decided to start the video going on a rant. But that said, so here's the story. By the way, guys, if you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So let's just, let you hear the details actually from law enforcement themselves in terms of the shooting that took place outside of a Dallas ICE facility this morning. Apparently 4 people were shot. So now we have the confirmation 2 are confirmed dead tragically, and that includes the shooter. But take a listen as law enforcement reports to you the actual details of what happened here. And you can see, by the way, anti-ICE engraved on the bullets themselves. So check it out.
Today at approximately 6:40 a.m., we received a assist the officer call. We responded to the call, got to the scene, and we later learned that we had 4 individuals that were shot, 2 of them deceased, including the shooter. The DPD was able to locate the shooter who was deceased. We're going to be working this investigation shoulder to shoulder with our federal partners. The FBI is on scene, and right now I'm going to introduce you to the SAC of the Dallas Field Division, FBI Joe Rumrock.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Joe Rothrock. I'm the special agent in charge of the Dallas FBI Field Office. I want to first start by thanking our partners in local law enforcement, specifically the Dallas Police Department, for their quick and timely response. I can confirm at this time that the FBI is investigating this incident as an act of targeted violence. It is unfortunately just the most recent example we've seen of targeted violence, to include here in North Texas, where back on July 4th, we saw a coordinated attack carried out against an immigration detention center in Alvarado, Texas. What I can also share with you is that early evidence that we've seen from rounds that were found near the suspected shooter contain messages that are anti-ICE in nature. Again, this is just the most recent example of this type of attack. This will be a whole of government response. There will be no resource not utilized to bring all those individuals who are responsible to bring them to justice.
An officer in North Texas for your support. This is the second time I've had to stand in front of you and talk about a shooter at one of my facilities, and I think that the takeaway from all of this is that the rhetoric has to stop. There are people out there who are seeing what is being placed online, and they're coming and they're doing acts of violence against ICE employees. So that's kind of all I have for today, is that it's just got to stop. It's dangerous, and people are losing their lives. Thank you.
Yeah, and some more details here, by the way. It has since been revealed that the reason why the shooter was firing at ICE agents but ended up hitting migrants in the process is because they opened fire into a van belonging to a federal law enforcement agency, basically that was bringing the detainees from other areas to the ICE detention center. These vans are typically not marked, and so it appears, right, they just fired into the vehicle blindly and ended up hitting migrants instead of ICE agents. How very left-wing of them, right? It's just tragic, by the way. I feel really bad about that, but, the head of the FBI field office in Dallas has said in the news conference that rounds found near the shooter contained messages that were anti-ICE in nature. Now, here's what's also interesting, okay? This, by all accounts, appears to be like a direct copycat of Tyler Robinson, because as you could actually see from the graphic here, right? This is someone on a rooftop basically trying to take like sniper shots at the ICE facility, first of all. Secondly, this is the photo released of the bullets that they found, and what you notice is that they're in a clip, right? So So, you have magazine, you have clip. I'm not going to explain the difference. Long story short, usually this is associated with older style guns out there. I'm not exactly sure which one it could be, but, venture to guess it could be potentially something like bolt action, similar to the Mauser that Tyler Robinson used, and the inspiration there could be, pretty obvious. Again, we'll get the full confirmation. Social media sleuths are already going into the guy's social media and his family's social media, and they're discovering, hey, according to them, huge family of leftists. But by all accounts, right, that's what the evidence here overwhelmingly appears to be, Unless you want to spread the very schizophrenic conspiracy theory that they copycatted exactly what Tyler Robinson did, even down to hey, let's use an old rifle that, can take accurate long-range shots types of things, and let's write anti-ice on the bullets, right? That this was all a right-wing diversion tactic because it's really a far righty who wanted to try to shoot ICE agents. It doesn't even make any sense. Then, unless you're going to go down that rabbit hole that is just really stupid, right? This is, yes, an obvious case of left-wing political violence. That said, let's hear how the media is going to react to it. Actually, let's start here by showing you what leftists, much like the Tyler Robinson thing, said all this morning on social media. Okay, just a couple examples. The vice president is not a reliable source of information. This is contradicted by the facts, right? MAGA influencers are unusually quiet about the mass shooters and the victims at the Dallas ICE facility. The white male shooter targeted 3 detainees. Again, not what happened here. He fired into the vehicle, right? So a white dude just shot 3 detainees at an ICE facility and then killed himself, and the GOP's trying to blame Antifa, guys. Blah, blah, blah. It was obviously, again, why on earth would a far-right terrorist target an ICE facility? Oh, because they just wanted to kill, detainees because they're racist against Latinos. Aren't there, easier ways to do that? And then, if you're so racist and you're so bigoted, all this stuff, okay, they're about to be deported anyway. So you're going to try to, get in a shootout with federal law enforcement just to target 3 of them when obviously there's easier ways to do it. Again, the logic here doesn't make any sense. It never did from the beginning. Now you're seeing even more evidence that, of what really happened here. And of course, the media now kind of, I wouldn't say backtracking, but just making really stupid excuses here. Let's listen to the law enforcement analyst over at MSNBC, who's going to say, quote, "You can't just assume that the ICE shooter was a leftist based on the anti-ICE messages written on his shell casings." Oh, really? Oh, really? Here's the justification, though, right? Same as the Tyler Robinson thing. He could have been doing that thinking it was funny, trying to put law enforcement on the wrong track. So that's why he also targeted an ICE facility, right? He just thought it was really funny to do this. He's really funny to, die in the process of targeting the one type of law enforcement out there that is so currently politically controversial in America. But guys, make no mistake, he's actually a right-winger, or he's just doing it for the irony. He just died for the sake of irony, apparently. Yeah. MSNBC, ladies and gentlemen, take a listen.
You can't just assume by that, what was written on that shell casing, that's necessarily his motivation. He could have been doing that to thinking it was funny, trying to put law enforcement on the wrong track. This is where, when you analyze the person's phone, computer, talk to his family and friends, that you get an idea of what his motivation perhaps really was.
And here we have the same exact thing coming from CNN. We do not know the motive of the shooter, guys. Let's not speculate, even though it seems obvious. Take a listen.
Those ICE agents not shot or hurt. We do not know, however, the motive of the shooter. That still remains an open question and will be under investigation, and we'll be continuing to ask our sources more about that. But what the Department of Homeland Security has pointed out is that this same facility back in late August also had to contend with a bomb threat at that facility. So certainly ICE has been contending with additional assaults, attacks, and threats to their facilities. But
yeah, so once again, what you mean to tell me is that left-wing political violence is extremely common. It's not even the first problem at this ICE facility. There's actually shootings at other ones in Texas just a couple months ago. Gavin Newsom knew this. He had this information. He still tried to pass the law against ICE anyway, wearing masks and covering their face, right? And here's the thing. Even if you want to act like the mainstream media, we don't yet know the motive, or you want to act like Democrats. Obviously, the guy was far right somehow. Either way, that doesn't actually change the nature of the recent debate. which is that ICE has a dangerous job. They're under fire. They're being targeted because of what Democrats are kind of rallying up and egging on their base to do. And hence why it's perfectly justified to cover their faces. Is it not? Right? Oh, a far-right guy targeted ICE, even if you want to believe that, like, ridiculous theory. Okay. So what you're saying is people are targeting ICE, and that's why they're covering their faces. Not because even the masks are going to keep them safe necessarily, but so that way people don't show up to their houses or try to target their families. By the way, the very reason why they started putting them on is because before they were showing their face and it was fine, but then these psychotic left-wing terrorists started making threats against them and their families and trying to dox them. Not a big surprise, guys. Oh, yeah, that would happen. Yeah. So it makes perfect sense is what you're saying, actually. I don't know. That said, I do want you to listen here to the response of Vice President J.D. Vance, because yes, he's saying exactly what I've been saying. I'm glad to see our vice president watches the videos. No, but in all seriousness, right? That starts, unfortunately, yes, at the very top of the Democratic Party, right? If you want to stop political violence, stop telling your supporters that everyone who disagrees with you is a Nazi, etc., etc. Exactly. Take a listen.
And they said that immigration enforcement, you know what they said? That immigration enforcement had detained a 5-year-old autistic girl in order to get to that girl's father. Turned out that story was a complete fabrication. It was a complete dishonest lie. But when you go around and lie about our law enforcement and you tell them that they're mistreating 5-year-old girls, what do you think is going to happen? When Democratic politicians incur doxing, when they encourage us to unmask ICE enforcement officers, what do you think is going to happen? When the mayor of Los Angeles encourages violent protesters to get in the face of our law enforcement, what do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen is political violence, and political violence has gotten out of control in this country. We got to stop it. We got to condemn it. And that starts, unfortunately, at the very top of the Democratic Party. If you want to stop political violence, stop attacking our law enforcement as the Gestapo. If you want to stop political violence, stop telling your supporters that everybody who disagrees with you is a Nazi. If you want to stop political violence, look in the mirror. That's the way that we stop political violence in this country, and we've got to do it. And while we're all mourning and rooting for and praying for everybody who was injured at that ICE facility, and as far as we know, it looks like some of the detainees, in other words, some of the potential illegal aliens, were some of those who were affected. Look, just because we don't support illegal aliens, we don't want them to be executed by violent assassins engaged in political violence either. So we're praying both for our ICE agents, but also for everybody who's affected by this terrible attack. But that was an ICE facility. And as these guys behind me know, and a few of our police officers know, police officers writ large face too many threats.
Yeah, so a great message, very true. But I'm going to take a wild guess here. The Democrat Party's not going to change one bit. And I say that because I've seen the same cycle over and over again. And do not be deceived that just because Democrat politicians put out a statement condemning violence means it's actually sincere. And let me tell you specifically why. You have to notice their deception tactics. So do you notice that, for instance, in the case of Tyler Robinson and what you're seeing here, they'll say on the surface, we're against violence, this is bad, we condemn it. But then they'll immediately start to shift the blame, right? They'll say it's Donald Trump's fault. Like J.B. Pritzker and many others actually said this. The violence in this country is being stoked by the president's rhetoric because he makes people really angry. And then our supporters who are really angry go and kill conservatives. And that's obviously the fault of Donald Trump and not ourselves, right? That's what they do. They've actually been saying this. Again, Trump needs to tone down the temperature. He's stoking the flames. By the way, he's also a Nazi, but they need to tone down the temperature. And it's the same thing with the assassins and the terrorists themselves, right? Look what they did with Tyler Robinson. We don't yet know a motive. We can't verify whether he was leftist. Half of our supporters online were saying that he was a MAGA right-winger and all this garbage, right? Why? Because that way they don't actually have to take accountability. Just pin it on the other, they cry out in pain as they strike you. Just pin it on the other side. And then that will be the justification as to why apparently they can just keep on spreading rhetoric like this. Because guys, don't you know, it's obviously the far right that is doing these things.
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach and are trying to hide their identities from the American people will be unsuccessful in doing that. This is America. This is not the Soviet Union. We're not behind the Iron Curtain. This is not the 1930s. And every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified.
Yeah, so prime example, right? There you have the Democrat House leader. This is not even AOC or Zoran Mandani. This is Hakeem Jeffries going out and comparing ICE to the Gestapo or Soviet secret police of the 1930s, as in his own words, and then further calls for their doxing, right? Says that as there is a period, by the way, again, it was already happening by this point. This is not the first example of massive threats, massive rioting, and active cases of attempted assassination and killing of ICE agents. He's going out as a leader of this country and saying, we're going to identify you and let's encourage doxers and let's egg all of this stuff on, right? And then they're going to turn around and claim no accountability when, obviously people are committing violence on their behalf, right? Because we're against violence. Antifa, we don't know what that is. Antifa is just an idea. It's not even an organization, None of this stuff is real. La, la, la. The far right is committing violence. La, la, la. It's almost cartoonish in a sense. It'd be really funny if it was not actually impacting real people's lives because the diversion tactics are so childishly obvious and ridiculous, right? It's literally like my dog ate my homework is exactly what they're engaging in right now. But anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.